1.
Well, now that we've analyzed this argument, which really means that we have revealed its logical structure, which means that we've identified what the premises are and what the conclusions are and where the inferences are. We've done that. We've basically done our work, but to sort of show that we've done it and to remind ourselves perhaps later what that logical structure is, we can lay out that logical structure a little bit more clearly and explicitly in more or less what they call standard form. A standard form is just where you take an argument and you write out all the premises and the conclusion, and you put the premises first, and then you draw a horizontal line under the premises, and under the horizontal line, you write the conclusion. For instance, let's take this first little sub-argument, this little chunk of reasoning that we identified as being an argument that ends in an intermediate conclusion. We can write it out like this. The war started without, paraphrasing, right? War started without being attacked by Iraq. And on the basis of that, of course, we have our first inference, right? So the war started without being attacked by Iraq, which implies that it was a war of aggression. And I suppose we can just draw a longer line to sort of show that this leads to the conclusion that the war was unjust. So the war started without being attacked by Iraq. Therefore, it was a war of aggression. Therefore, the war was unjust. That's the first chunk of reasoning. The second we identified as this chunk here. And remember, we're going to put our conclusion last, and our conclusion actually comes first in the argument, right? But it comes last when we put it in standard form. So why don't we just put that out there already, and then we'll list the premises above. Oh, that's not it. So we can always paraphrase. We don't have to include the extraneous information here, because the basic claim is that the outcome of the war was disastrous for the USA. Let's put it a little smaller font. And that's going to be the conclusion to this argument, to this sub-argument. So we'll put a horizontal line above it, and we'll just simply list the premises above. 4,000 soldiers were killed in combat. We don't have to include everything there, right? Generation of young women bear the physical and emotional scars of combat. It's our second. Let's make sure they're set off. And then finally, the war has increased the likelihood of terrorism directed against the USA. Again, we don't have to include everything because we're just sort of showing the structure. So here's the logical structure of the first chunk. The war started without being attacked by Iraq. Therefore, it was a war of aggression. Therefore, the war was unjust. 4,000 soldiers were killed. Generation of young women and men bear the physical and emotional scars of combat. Wars only increase the likelihood of terrorism. Therefore, the outcome of the war was disastrous for the USA. I'm doing this rather informally because, I think it's easier. Um, but then remembering that neither of the conclusions that we've identified is the overall conclusion. We sort of put all of this above that last horizontal line, and we finish our analysis or finish the standard form by putting the overall conclusion underneath it all. So this is a rather sloppy, but you sort of get the point here. This kind of analysis is a lot easier to do by hand. You can draw arrows and put things in columns very easily, things I'm not very good at. But you can see how this intermediate conclusion and this intermediate conclusion are meant ultimately to support this overall conclusion.